One of these days, I got to figure out who came up with the term world hopper as the term the Cosmere fandom uses to discuss people who cross over from different book series. It feels like, I don't know, it just feels like a missed opportunity. Cosmere not is just right there.
Cosmere not.
Cosmere not. Like Cosmonaut. Yeah. Anyway.
That's one too many syllables, don't you think?
No. Cosmere not. No, sounds good.
It kind of feels like the words tripping out of my mouth. Cosmere not. Like stumbling.
Nah. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual listener's guide to Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm your co-host and Cosmere not, Nick Gorman.
And I'm your co-host, AJ Gorman.
So today we're talking about the Emperor's Soul, and we're doing a full spoiler episode. So we're talking about Emperor's Soul, but we're also talking about how it fits in with the rest of the Cosmere, and there's also a little bit of speculation about just what's to come.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be discussing anything huge in the Cosmere. So if there's one or two books that you haven't read, I don't think it's going to ruin your reading of any of the other Cosmere. So
nah, and
mostly talking about big overall theories.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and just overview of what my notes are. I've got, what sort of what people show up in Emperor's Soul to show up in other series. As well as just comparing the magic systems with different magic systems. And I know you love Realmatic Theory and how it's presented in this book.
I don't know if I would say that I don't know if I say that I love Realmatic Theory. I think it confuses me, so I try to pay extra special attention to it. So maybe one day I feel like I'll know Realmatic Theory.
Yeah. Well, like, do we want to start with Realmatic Theory then? And how it's presented in this book and versus how it's presented in other books?
Yeah, so I think I did read Emperor's Soul before I read Stormlight, but I didn't really know what was going on. So after reading Stormlight and seeing soul casting, this Emperor's Soul book made a whole lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
And I could really see the beauty in it, whereas before I was like, whatever, details. Those aren't important in Brandon's world.
Well, it is interesting because like they talk about, the cognitive aspect of an object, has a lot to do with whether a soul stamp is going to take, right? And I guess somehow the soul stamp acts on its spiritual essence or whatever. But like you said in Stormlight Archive, they go to the cognitive realm and see it more concretely.
Yeah, so let's take a step back here. So Realmatic Theory is the premise that everything exists on three different planes. The physical, so what we see around us. The cognitive, what that object thinks of itself and what others think of that object. And then the spiritual realm, the spirit of each object and person.
Yeah.
So when we see soul casting in Stormlight Archive, one early example that we see is Shallan trying to get this stick to become fire.
Yes.
And so she kind of brings herself into the cognitive realm and is trying to convince the stick. And the stick is just like, I'm a stick.
I am a stick.
And just keeps saying that.
I am a stick.
And she's really not good at convincing the stick that the stick wants to turn into fire or catch fire.
I'm a stick?
Which is a lot more of an emotional kind of way to convince an object to change.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas in Emperor's Soul, what we see is this magic system is you create a stamp and then you stamp an object. And it's a little bit more kind of equation based. So you spend, weeks, months working on a stamp. So you're laying lines on top of one another, and then you stamp the object, which kind of connects to that object's soul, and then transforms it.
Okay. Yeah.
Now we still have to, your equations still have to be pertinent to that object's So what we saw in this book was Shy complaining that I couldn't get this window to frickin' turn into the window that I wanted it to turn into. But she could get it to turn into a stained glass window because that window was familiar with stained glass and wanted to be a stained glass window. So like there is still that, cognitive realm, like what that object thinks of itself kind of playing into it. But I feel like it's weird that everything is a little bit more equation based.
I look at it a little bit different. Like, they don't really talk about equations quite like they do so much in Aandor, or in Elantris with Aandor,
Yeah.
right?
But I mean, it's formalized enough that Gaotoa can look at Shy's work and know what's going on. It's like something that he can read. So it is more formal.
Yeah. See, the difference that I look at it between soul stamping and soul casting, right? Or forgery and soul casting, whatever you want to call it. I mean, even though they're both transformation magic, Shy doesn't really, like you said, she doesn't actually directly negotiate with the thing that she's stamping. She needs to, understand the thing on a deep level. She needs to understand its history, and she needs, most importantly, whatever she's going to try to turn it into, it needs to be believable when she converts it from one thing to another. And, whereas with soul casting, it's, we see Yasna, we see Shallan, like they negotiate with whatever they're trying to soul cast. And Yasna has an easier time with it because she's so authoritative. It's very personality driven, right?
Well, see, I was thinking about that, and I was gonna agree with you on that until I had thought a couple days ago, like, but what about when she missed those thugs in Shallan's lesson? Like, I don't see her like in any way like convincing a soul to just turn into mist.
Yes. And there's got to be something different going on there, right?
And we haven't seen it in action.
We haven't seen it in action. But we do know, for things that are more inanimate, it definitely is easier, when you have more stormlight, right? And when you've got a personality that is more authoritative.
Yeah, it's just they feel so similar, but so different.
Well, the
forgery and soul casting.
The other big thing is, it almost seems like, so soul stamping in some ways can be more impersonal, right? Because they don't, negotiate with the soul of whatever they're trying to change. So, the other example of that is the Emperor is going to be able to restamp himself, right? Whereas the personality of the soulcaster, Yasna is a much more effective soulcaster compared to Shallan, and not, it's not a technique thing. It's how it's personality driven. Apparently, we're only at book 4.
I was gonna say, that's a pretty strong statement right there.
It is. It certainly seems that way, right? And I think I forgot her name, but there was a soulcaster in one of the interludes where they're on the ship trying to get to Emiya, and she needs to convince the stone spikes to turn to air. It feels very similar in that interlude as well.
I've only read that one once. I need to go back.
Yeah. So the other thing, the other big difference, I guess, between how it's done is like what it is capable of doing, right? Where for soul casting, they change the material of the thing, right? Like Risen has an interlude where they had wooden toys that were soul cast into metal and that they were trading with the Shin, right? But you never see them soul cast a table into a better looking table. It's not something that it could do. But you see them change things from metal, or from metal to grain to blood. They've got the basic essences that they can use with soul casting.
I never really thought about it that way.
But they never change the shape or size of a thing. Like Shy changes her whole room size.
Okay.
And
that definitely helps me think of them as two distinct magic systems.
Well, and it does seem like soul stamping is capable of changing the materials, but it seems more challenging for soul stamping, right? Because Shy was working on her prison cell or whatever, right? And she, step one was to identify all the different metals,
rocks.
Yeah, all the different rocks, the different kinds of stones, and everything like that. But I think she mentioned something about even if she was able to identify all of them, the stamps wouldn't hold for very long.
Right.
So that it, wouldn't be capable of making a permanent change like soul casting is.
I did not see all of these differences. I did not think about all of these
Yeah,
differences
I mean,
between the magic systems.
It just kind of seems like,
I was just like, my brain was just like, oh, these are like practically the same. And I'm like, sure, let's not think any further on that. So.
Well, no. The other thing is soul casting, you only change the material it's made out of, right? But, soul stamping, we see things be made whole again, right? Where the table had been damaged and it becomes a better version of itself, things like that.
Because we're rewriting the history, right?
Yes. I wonder if there's a way to make an infinite pizza glitch type of thing where you eat half a pizza, you stamp the remainder and make it whole again, and then keep eating it. Or, just something like that. Like, I don't think you can do more than one stamp on the same object. So,
You should send that one into Brandon.
Yeah, or send that one on a Reddit or something. Yeah.
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 I mean, it's one of those questions where it's just like, why?
Why?
Why? Of all the things to ask about.
Well, I mean, that basically, because one of the big plot points in Elantris, which is set on the same world and as the Emperor's Soul, is that they're both set on Cell, is that there's a big famine going on in Elantris before the Elantrians come, make their glorious return or whatever. So it's like, well, you could just make less food, right? If you could change,
well, grow less food and
yeah. Well, yeah, right. But if you could just grow like 1 grain of rice and then soul stamp it to be 1 million,
solve world hunger.
Yeah, solve Cell world hunger on Cell anyway.
I feel like Brandon's gonna, if he answered it, he would be wiggling out of that one.
It'd probably be a read and find out kind of deal.
No, because I feel like he always makes sure his magic systems are limited. So it's like, well, you're not solving all of the world's problems by having these magic systems.
Well, and like there are major limitations on soul stamping, right? Like this, there's the feasibility aspect of it, right? Where so you couldn't make one thing something unfeasibly large. And also it's like, okay, so what happens when you take, I don't think we see an example of something that soul stamped get, broken. I mean, we see them break the stamp. But yeah, so what happens when you've got a pizza that's only whole because of the stamp over in this one slice, and then you take another slice out of it? Well, does that slice continue to exist, or does it just disappear? I don't know. Do they need to be physically a part of each other?
You're breaking my brain.
Hey, this whole podcast thing was your idea.
I was hoping to make sense of it, and now we're just coming up with more questions. So no, this is not helpful.
Well, So we've already talked a little bit about realmatic theory and a lot about comparing it to soul casting, because soul casting also has a lot to do with, the different realms. You want to just continue talking about soul stamping compared to other magic systems? Because it's also pretty similar in a lot of ways to Aeon Door, right?
Yes.
Where they both have a written component, where Elantrians have the Aeons and the Forgers have their stamps.
Right.
Both have a geographical component in the writing, where Aeons always include a map of Aerilon, whereas the sealing mark at the end of each soul stamp is a city of Mapon.
Yeah, there was only one really throwaway line in the book, so if you missed it, it was only briefly mentioned in one line, so you had to really be paying attention.
Yeah. And for both of them, you definitely need intent and precision and a connection to that home region that's part of the either the Aeon or the stamp, Aerilon or Mapon.
I think one of the big differences is that Aeon Door, you have to be an Elantrian.
Yeah, you've got to be like invited.
Right. More on that in a second. Whereas Shai says that anyone can do soul stamping.
Well, I think, because I thought there was like a word of Brandon or something that you need to have a connection to Mapon, because it depends on where you're born on Cell, which sort of magic system you're more likely to have access to.
Right, but it's with the Elantrians, you have to be kind of wake up transformed into an Elantrian, whereas probably anyone in Mapon
so
can learn how to do the stamping.
Right, so for it's not enough to be born in Aerilon to become an Elantrian. There's that extra secret sauce that hasn't quite been explored yet.
Right.
Whereas anybody who's from that area of Cell, can become a forger. The other thing is that Elantrians are inherently invested, right? Where
A
they
high amount of investiture.
they have a high amount of investiture, right? But forgers don't. I mean, they just, all of the magic is in the stamp, whereas Elantrians have something inherently magical about themselves.
Well, we don't know if there's anything to do. Well, I guess we do know. Because Shai does say that you can make a stamp out of anything.
Yeah.
Just like you can make an Aeon out of, an Aeon door out of
An Aeon out of
any
the air,
material.
yeah.
Like how we see that.
Yep.
Elantris is made out of.
It's confusing to talk about soul stamping sometimes because the stamp
Is it?
is both the mark on the object as well as the thing you use to make the mark.
Yeah, but they don't. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just.
Well, that's English for you.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a distinguish in other translated works.
I don't know.
One of the other things, we see the color red a lot in the Cosmere to signify not great things, and I do want to mention that when Shai does use stamps on a human being, there is red smoke that comes off.
I'm not sure it's to mean not good things, but I think it's a mixing of different investitures is what I thought there was like a word of Brandon explaining
A mixing of different investitures.
Yeah, or that you've got a investiture sort of changing a soul, right? I thought there was like a word of Brandon that explained that, red, and particularly like red eyes, means like a mixing of different kinds of investiture. So like when the Parshendi or the listeners start to have red eyes, that's because they are, maybe more inherently attuned to the investiture of honor or cultivation, but then Odium's investiture starts to get in with them. And the Trellish creatures in Mistborn Era 2 that have the glowing red eyes are being impacted by Trellium.
So do we think this
autonomy.
is a mix, when you stamp a soul, that's a mix of dominion and devotion?
Yeah, or I mean, I'm not sure if it's just that, because the other thing is that
we should mention. Did we mention in the Elantris episode that Cell is the world that the shards dominion and devotion were on and got destroyed?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, we must have. But yeah, Cell has both two shards, devotion and dominion. But the other thing is, like, with those two examples, the Parshendi and those human chimera things in the underground in Bands of Morning, it's that the shard is influencing a sapient creature's soul, right?
Yes.
And that's kind of exactly what's happening with an essence mark, is that she's stamping a soul, a human soul.
Yeah, but you said different kinds of investiture.
Right. So I guess I'm unclear is what I'm trying to say, where I don't know if it's because there's a mix of different investitures or if it's because magic is directly influencing a person's soul.
Oh, okay. All right.
Speaking of red and not great implications, there is another magic system presented in the Emperor's Soul. We've got the Blood Sealer.
So in addition to the 5 that were mentioned in Elantris, we have soul stamping and blood sealing.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's probably more that we don't know about.
But wait, there's more. Billy Mays here.
Brandon, you didn't have to be so big.
Yeah. So blood sealing isn't really explained in too much detail, but what we see on screen is that the Blood Sealer has 2 distinct abilities. He uses Shai's blood to place a ward around her room. She can still leave it whenever she wants, but he will know and he will hunt her. And that sort of plays into his second ability that's shown on screen, is he uses other people's skeletons as pets, the quote unquote pets, which are like the skeletals. So they also are stamped in blood on their forehead, or I guess their skull.
So this is really akin to like a traditional necromancer type.
It certainly looks like it in terms of ambiance. Yeah, but I mean, we don't really know too much about how that works. Like, do they want fresh corpses? Would it work with not just the skeletons? We know it has. They need to have fresh blood to use for their stamping, but the details are just kind of and there's also some misinformation in the book where the strikers are talking about how the blood sealer could they are fooled by Shy's fake letter about having collections of their hair and fingernails and things like that.
Right. So there's more.
Whereas
There's
that
more
wouldn't-
to this blood sealing magic than we have seen. But to be honest, I don't really care if we never get back to this.
Huh. Well, it also, I mean,
I know Brandon's got like 30 more years, of books, but I'm not really
well,
cool with necromancers.
do you also feel that way about the Lifeless in Warbreaker, or is that different, or is that worse?
They're more interesting to me than a necromancer.
Well, I mean, they're just different flavors of traditional your D&D style necromancer.
I don't play D&D.
Well, okay, but I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
To me, it's 6 of one, a half dozen of the other.
Well, I know Brandon has so many things in his head, and he's left so many hints and clues about broader stuff. I'm just saying, if you're listening, Brandon, if we never get back to this corner of this part of the magic, I'm okay with that.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's...
So other Cosmere stuff, as regards to soul stamping and forgery.
Yeah.
There are a couple things that are mentioned. Rocklist, the unforgeable metal. So I'm assuming that's what would be aluminum, because that from world to world in the Cosmere, that is unable to be affected by investiture.
Yeah, it's got to be either aluminum or silver. Probably aluminum, though.
Silver?
Silver has interesting effects with investiture as well, right? Where you see it, I mean, it's probably aluminum.
Okay, we're going to go with aluminum.
Yeah.
I'm also really upset. I told you this the other day, but I'm still upset that Shy's like, oh yeah, I studied like all these forms of forgery, but there's that like one branch, resealing, which aka healing, that I didn't really bother studying. And I'm like, you are a smart, like street smart girl, and you didn't practice how to heal yourself? Like, that upsets me.
Well,
that doesn't make sense to me.
It does make sense to me, though, because it's a matter of effort versus reward, right? And I mean, I know the rewards are good, but like the effort and the risks are also high. Where she, like Shy explains in the book, you screw up a forgery on a piece of paper, okay, you've got an ugly piece of art. You screw up a forgery on, a leg, there you go, that's done.
Yeah, but she has to know the life that she's living. Like, that she's bound to get into trouble at some point, and if she could save herself by healing her leg so she can run away, or like fix her arm so she could, finish attacking someone who's attacking her,
I don't think so, man.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that she was so studious and not like, oh, I practice everything except for this one thing. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
So I've got, I guess, one more thing to talk about in soul stamping, about what we know about the magic system and how it appears in different places in the Cosmere.
Okay.
Because we also see soul stamping in another book. We see it in the Lost Metal, right?
Yes.
But it looks different there. And even though it's, Shy appears in the Lost Metal, she's one of the members of the Ghost Bloods. We should talk about that. But the way soul stamping works is different there, where she's not on cell. So it takes a little bit more effort for her to do. And she doesn't, it's a little bit more of a fast-paced environment. So she's not sitting down and carving new stamps. She's got universal stamps, as well as her essence mark.
So universal meaning that it's not Mapon that is the sealing stamp.
No, that's not. She can stamp anything with those. Which, kind of when you first read that in Lost Metal, you're like, that's not how soul stamping works. But it took me a little bit to get over. It's like, how does this jive? How are these the same magic system? So, but it's because they have different sort of intents, right? So her universal stamps in Lost Metal do things like make holes or repair broken objects. So it's not as specific a thing she's going for. And then also they're not intended to take forever, right? Like she She
Oh,
does.
they don't have to
You know,
hold.
so they don't have to be, they don't have to be perfect forgeries like where she's making, copies of masterworks to hang in Frava's office. So it's, so she doesn't even want the stamp to really take. So they don't need to be quite as, specific to the object that they're doing. So,
So there's always more to the magic system.
yeah, there's more to the magic system, and like it gets applied in different ways than what you necessarily expect. And in order to get her stamps to do anything at all, I think she had like a jar of purified door, something like that she needed to use as ink rather than just any old ink she had lying around because she wasn't on sale.
Oh. Well, that brings me to the next kind of thought, which we always know that there is a gas, a liquid, and a solid of investiture on each world.
Yeah. Well, associated with each shard, I think. Something like that.
And I was just wondering if the soul stone was was a solid form of investiture.
Well, I thought when investiture is a solid, it's always a metal, is what I thought. I don't know if that's just my assumption based off Mistborn, or if that's ever been confirmed in A Word of Brandon. But I always thought that, that because that was what a god metal is, right? So your Lerasium, your Atium.
But there can be flecks of metal in stones, because they mentioned that the soul stone is stone with flecks of red in it.
So maybe it's got metal embedded in it.
Yeah.
That could be.
That's a geological thing, right?
Sure. I don't know. So it's like some kind of god metal ore.
Yeah.
Like the Atium geodes that come out of the pits of Hathsin and Mistborn.
Yeah.
Oh, I could buy that, because it does seem to have pretty unique properties in terms of being soft and sculptable until you set it to fire, and then it's hard like quartz.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about, stone material properties, so I don't know if that, really corresponds to anything in real life. I don't know, but.
Yeah, there was another comment that the only other material that makes a better stamp is crystal.
Yeah, but that's hard to work with to get it to be the shape you want. Unless you, because if there were a soul caster and a soul stamper working together, you could have a really easy to work with shape, and then you could cast it into metal, or cast it into crystal, or cast it into diamond, or whatever. Right? You give me a look.
My brain can't comprehend all of these different magic people working together, because then it's just like.
So different magic people working together.
What?
So the Ghost Bloods. So, and this was something that really, I don't know, it needles at my brain a little bit, because Shai seems very similar to Kelsier, but also kind of opposite to Kelsier in a lot of ways. Where, like, yes, they're thieves, they're highly effective thieves, and they seem to have strong, personalities where, okay, now Kelsier, started a religion, a cult basically around him. But, Shai is able to convert all of her jailers, like literally convert all of her jailers except for, Captain Zhu, right, into basically being her friends. It's most pronounced
emotionally manipulated them, yes.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Everybody wants to be her friend. She read, Dale Carnegie's book about how to win friends and influence people.
She became likable.
Yes, but so like that, like they've got that in common, but. There was something she said specifically in day 3 that made me think, that is kind of the opposite of Kelsier's philosophy, where she said that she is not in the business of getting people killed for no reason when talking about her guards. And I was just like, that's not. Kelsier would, he would have no qualms. He would have no qualms. You're a good guy, but you're serving the Empire? Not really a good guy then, are you? Dead.
Yeah, he's not the greatest of human.
Yeah. So, but it's so, I don't know. I'm interested to see. I think, you talked about this in one of our Mistborn episodes. I think I'll be interested to see if we learn more about how Kelsier recruits all these different people with different personalities to be working with the Ghost Bloods, because.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. It's, it's different.
Well, speaking of Mistborn, I do have a note in here that I think A Word of Brandon, he said gold mistings would find it easier to create their own soul stamps given their power to see their history.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense because you can, go back and look at your own history. Okay. Yeah, I dig. See
Yeah.
who you used to be and see your, okay, yeah.
But let's get away from Mistborn a little bit and talk more about Hoyd.
Aha.
So we should mention that when Brandon originally wrote this novella, his prologue was Shy talking to Hoyd, or the Fool, as she calls him. And in that prologue, they pretty much had a conversation of Hoyd saying, I really enjoyed.
Pause. This deleted scene, this deleted prologue is available on Brandon Sanderson's website. You scroll over to deleted scenes and go over to Emperor's Soul, and you can read it for yourself. But continue.
But the point is, they're talking, and you get the impression that Hoyd really kind of respects Shy and appreciates, sparring with her. Maybe not physically sparring, but competing, outwitting each other.
Because they were both going after the Moon Scepter.
Well, supposedly they were going after it together, and then Wit betrayed her. Sorry, I know his name's Hoyd, but in my mind, he's Wit.
Hoyd isn't his original name.
No.
I don't know if we've seen his original name on screen yet, but different people call him Hoyd or Sephandrius or Wit,
I didn't know that.
Or the Fool.
In my mind, he's Wit.
Yeah, I don't know. He's Hoyd.
Anyways, I can't tell this prologue. So they enjoy sparring together, but Wit did betray Shy, got the Moon Scepter, but he visited Shy and said, "Hey, I really got to go. I don't have time to hang around here, but I did what I could for you. There's an opportunity coming, so make the best of it."
Which is so interesting in the context of the book, right? So how did he set up the opportunity for Shy? Did he orchestrate the assassination attempt on the Emperor? Did he time the theft, so that he would take advantage of the assassination attempt on the Emperor, somehow? I don't know.
Or did he put it into the government's mind, like, hey,
the arbiters. Yeah.
The arbiters that, hey, you could have someone's soul stamp.
Yeah. You could reforge his soul with forgery.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't know. So he didn't end up using that prologue as the official prologue just because it didn't really make sense for the story. Having the prologue
and it was
start with the arbiters and Gaotoa and then ending with Gaotoa really was the best. Gaotoa.
Hey, if you're gonna make a point in every episode that the audiobook narrators can't seem to pronounce the names consistently, I'm just saying you got to get all the consonants in there.
Anyways. Didn't use the Wit prologue, but if you read it, he's like, I still consider this to be more or less in the canon.
It's very much almost canonical, right? Even though there's some things that are contradicted by the actual book.
Yeah.
But
what I find frustrating about that is Hoyd has a comment in there saying, "You won't see me again," to Shy.
Well, he's just wrong.
But normally, Brandon has said, every single word that Wit says is purposeful.
Well, okay, he's just trying to say that, hey, yeah, I don't know, he's not sticking around. I don't know, man.
And I think they will see each other again.
They have seen each other again. They see each other in the Lost Metal.
It's so long since I've read it.
They wait, because Hoyd is a taxi driver and, Shy as Moonlight, they do a respectful nod to each other or something.
That's right. Okay.
They don't interact much, but they do see each other for sure.
I want to see more of the crossing of wits.
Yeah. Was that a pun?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Good. Do we want to talk about the word of Brandon stuff we've learned about the Moon Scepter, or because that it's the thing that Shy was trying to steal? I thought you were the one who was telling me about this. There was a word of Brandon that explained that the Moon Scepter includes information on it that facilitates translation between the different forms of magic on Cell from one to another. So if you wanted to, have more of a connection with the Elantrian Aeons compared to Soul, when you're in a region that's more closely, allows soul stamping.
If I told you that, I forgot it.
I don't know. So you're hearing it third hand, folks.
From the context of the book, we know that Hoyd took it. We know it's the most famous piece in the Empire.
It's like the crown. It looks like it's the crown jewels, right? Like the yeah.
And we know the little of what we know of Hoyd's motivations is that he's going around the Cosmere trying to pick up as many magic systems as he possibly can.
Yes, that does seem to be his overall goal. He wants to be a Knight Radiant. He wants to be a Mistborn. He's an Elantrian.
He wants to control all forms of investiture.
Yeah.
Which, what is the motivation behind that? What does he plan to do with that? That's questionable.
Who can say?
That's questionable. Do we know? Is Hoyd? I mean, Hoyd does seem to help out our main characters.
But he also does say in The Way of Kings, I think, that he would burn Roshar to the ground if it means that he would get his goals.
Right. So, Hoyd, not trustworthy.
No.
Not trustworthy whatsoever. Another thing that we see kind of throughout the Cosmere is that in each book, Brandon has his characters swear by something in world.
Yeah.
And in this world, we have Shy. Her swears are knights and knights of fire. And the only somewhat explanation that we get of this is that she says that her ancestors had worshipped rocks that fell from the sky at night, the soul of broken gods whose chunks had been called. Those chunks had been called. Master craftsmen would carve them and bring out the shape.
Huh. Okay, yeah. That does kind of, bodies of broken gods. That does kind of seem, yeah. I see why you might think they might be the bodies of broken gods, maybe.
I don't know. If that's the explanation for the knights and knights of fire, it's not as... I don't like it as much as the swears in other books.
Yeah.
In case you missed it, there were a couple kind of nods to what happened to Elantris. We see Shy almost run into a red priest.
Yeah.
And mention that there's a strained relationship with Swarden. And Jindo was also mentioned.
Wasn't that where the table was from or something?
No, Shy got upset because
Gautana
was saying, "Oh, like the Jindo and my pawn are like the same people," and Shy was like, "No, we are fucking not." Apparently that they were related at one point, but they diverged quite a while ago.
Well, we've got the end of my notes. Do you have anything else?
I want to talk about Shy's essence marks.
Okay, yeah.
So, in Emperor's Soul, she talks about having 5 marks, or so there are there are 2 kind of sets of things. There are the metal plates, and then there are the actual stamps that connect to those plates. So the 5 that she has, the first one is Shizan, a warrior, and then we don't really have names for the rest of them. The second one is a woodsman or a survivalist. Third one is a scholar. The fourth one, Gautana says, a beggar? Why would you want to be emaciated? And is this showing that most of your hair would fall out and that your skin would become scarred? On my first reading of this, I'm like, oh, that's she stamps herself to become an Elantrian. Because Elantrians, during the Reod, or after the Reod, their hair would fall out, they would pretty much become emaciated, and their skin was scarred.
No.
And then you said no. And
then
I went back to the section and I read it further, and then she does talk about actually being it would turn her into a beggar, and she would become better at lockpicking and become a contortionist and whatnot. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't to become an Elantrian. She made that stamp later to use.
Yeah,
and
in the
we see
Lost
her.
Metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the 5th one is her exit strategy, just becoming a simple farm girl.
Living a quote unquote simple life, which I feel like, all right, that's such a cliche that, oh yes, it's a simple life of farming. It's like I don't know what I don't know, but I do know that, my grandparents all, my grandparents were all farmers and then decided not to be because that is a hard life as well.
Well, it keeps you busy.
Yes, and anyway, yeah. I don't know. I always hate that perception that it's a simple life.
Well, simple and hard are different. But anyways, I bet she's got way more essence marks.
Yeah, certainly by the time we see her in Lost Metal. Because becoming an Elantrian, that's a tough one.
But she's got, she's close enough history. At least, she's on cells. She could have. It's within her means to stamp herself and get those powers, which is not something that Wit was able to do.
Yes, this is also true.
All right. I think that there's going to be way more to talk about with Shy after I reread Era 2.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about it in those books, in those reads. So thanks for podcasting with me, dear. And, listeners, thanks for listening to our podcast.
Oh, wait a minute.
We
had a listener question.
We had a question?
A listener question, yes. You told me this, remember? The question was if our listeners should read Elantris before listening to our Elantris post-read episode. And our recommendation is yes.
Yeah. But, it depends on your spoiler policy. Your own personal spoiler policy, right? But yeah, if it were us, read the book before you listen to our review and our breakdown of what happened in the book.
And if we've kind of been discussing playing with the idea of maybe doing a couple short episodes to recap each novel, if that's something that you're interested in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to our podcast. To send us additional feedback, thoughts, or questions, please reach out. Our email is cosmerecasual@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is licensed through Tribe of Noise. The artist is Ketsa and the song is Odyssey.
And until next time, keep your wits about you.